What if the US map we all know suddenly changed? What if some American states, tired of political chaos, craving stability, and culturally aligned with the North, actually decided to leave the US and join Canada? Sounds like fiction? Maybe not, because some of these states already behave more like Canadian provinces than part of America itself. So, which states are we talking about? And could this actually happen? But first, here's a quick question for you. Which country shares the longest land border with the US? It's super easy, so drop your answer in the comments below. And here's a big one we'll answer throughout this video. What would it actually take, legally and politically, for a US state to break away and join another country like Canada? Stick around because the answer might shock you. Number 10. Vermont. Nestled in the Green Mountains and maple syrup valleys, Vermont has always marched to the beat of its own fiddle-playing, flannel-wearing drummer. Did you know that Vermont was actually an independent republic for 14 years before joining the US in 1791? That's right. It had its own currency, postal service, and even diplomatic ambitions. Fast forward to modern times, and the rebellious spirit hasn't quite disappeared. Enter the Second Vermont Republic, a peaceful secessionist movement that's been quietly but persistently advocating for Vermont to break away and possibly join Canada. And let's be honest, Vermont's chilled-out, progressive vibe fits better with Quebec than it does with, say, Texas. Speaking of Quebec, Vermont and its northern neighbor are practically besties. They share trade routes, cultural events, bilingual communities, and even a mutual love for cheese curds and eco-friendly politics. Vermont imports millions in Canadian electricity, and its politicians often echo the same healthcare and environmental policies you'd hear in Ottawa. So if push came to shove, and Vermont held a "should we go Canadian" referendum, you'd better believe there'd be more than just a few yeses in favor. But what if Vermont actually leads the way and others follow? Is this the quiet beginning of a much bigger breakaway movement? Stay with us. The next state might just surprise you even more. Number 9. Maine. If Vermont is the flannel-wearing rebel, Maine is the quietly codependent neighbor who pretends they're independent, but secretly can't survive without Canada. Literally. Most people don't realize that a huge chunk of Maine's electricity comes straight from Quebec's hydroelectric grid. So if Canada ever decided to flip the off switch, half the state might be lighting candles and boiling water over a campfire. Maine isn't just sipping Canadian power, it's gulping it like a lifeline. And when it comes to trade, over $3 billion worth of goods flow across the border each year, from lumber and seafood to machinery and maple goodies. Economically, Maine and Canada are more like conjoined twins than just neighbors. But it's not just dollars and megawatts, it's culture too. In many of Maine's coastal towns, you'll find French-speaking communities that feel more at home with New Brunswick than with, say, New York. The vibe? Rugged coastline, tight-knit fishing villages, and a lifestyle that mirrors Canada's maritime provinces more than mainstream America. Even politically, Maine often leans toward progressive policies that echo Canadian values. So here's a thought. If the US ever faced a political earthquake or economic collapse, would Maine quietly pack its bags and slip across the border? Or would Canada extend a friendly maple-scented invitation? Keep watching. The next state might just be more Canadian than Tim Hortons itself. Number 8. New Hampshire. New Hampshire has always marched to the beat of its own drum, and that drum sounds a lot like a maple syrup-soaked freedom-loving anthem that could echo through the forests of Quebec. With no sales tax, no income tax, and a fiercely libertarian culture, New Hampshire practically wears a "Don't Tread on Me" hoodie year-round. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 2022, a group of lawmakers actually proposed an amendment to put secession on the state ballot. That's not some fringe Facebook post. That's real political movement. While it didn't pass, the very idea being debated in the legislature shows just how deep the state's independent streak runs. And guess who's been whispering sweet decentralization dreams in its ear? Canada. Politically, New Hampshire's emphasis on local control and limited federal oversight feels a lot like the decentralized model used in Canadian provinces. But it's not just about politics. It's about dollars, too. New Hampshire shares strong economic ties with Canada, especially in trade, tourism, and cross-border business relationships. Many of its industries, from lumber to high-tech manufacturing, depend on Canadian markets and partnerships. Even culturally, there are overlaps. Both regions boast small towns, a passion for nature, and an appreciation for public services. Just don't bring up universal healthcare at a town hall meeting unless you want to debate. So here's the question. If things ever got rocky in Washington, would New Hampshire double down on live free or die? Or maybe consider live free or apply for dual citizenship? The seeds of separation have been planted, so don't be surprised if one day this quiet, granite-loving state starts eyeing the red maple leaf. But what happens next? Stay tuned, because the next state might be even closer to the edge than you think. Number 7. Minnesota. If you've ever been to Minnesota in the winter, you might have wondered, wait, did I accidentally cross into Canada? With its snow-covered lakes, love for hockey, and friendly Minnesota nice culture, this state feels like Canada's long-lost twin. Minnesota shares a massive border with Canada, and it's not just a line on the map, it's a living, breathing connection. The state exports nearly $7 billion worth of goods to Canada annually, making it one of the most Canada-reliant economies in the U.S. From grain to machinery, this partnership isn't just strong, it's vital. And while we're talking identity, you might be surprised how many Minnesotans hold dual U.S.-Canadian citizenship, especially in border towns where it's not uncommon to have breakfast in Minnesota and dinner in Manitoba. But here's the plot twist. This Canadian connection isn't just modern, it's historical. Back in the day, much of the region that is now Minnesota was under British rule through the Hudson's Bay Company. The legacy still lingers in the culture, architecture, and even speech patterns of older generations. Ever heard a Minnesotan say "ope" or "eh"? Yeah, that's not an accident. So if America ever went into political chaos or economic collapse, would Minnesota quietly pack its parka, grab a Tim Hortons coffee, and head north? Maybe it's not such a far-fetched idea after all. And wait till you hear about the next state. It might just already be halfway Canadian. Number 6. North Dakota. North Dakota might come off as a quiet, unassuming state in the heart of the American plains. But don't let that fool you. Economically, it's practically whispering sweet nothings to Canada. With over 80% of its international exports headed north, North Dakota is more tied to Canada than most people realize. From wheat and oil to machinery, the economic veins of this state flow directly into Canadian markets. And it's not just about business. Residents in border towns sometimes rely on Canadian healthcare facilities for quicker or more accessible services. Yes, that's right. Americans going to Canada for healthcare. Let that one sink in. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find that North Dakota has long flirted with ideas of more than just trade cooperation. Historically, there were even murmurs of merging with Manitoba. A U.S. state and a Canadian province joining forces? Sounds like the plot of a Netflix political thriller. But with a strong pro-business attitude and a growing skepticism toward federal interference, North Dakota's political climate aligns surprisingly well with Canada's decentralized approach. Could this quiet state one day surprise us all with a bold move toward the maple leaf? Stick around, because if North Dakota blinks first, others just might follow. Number 5. Montana. If there were a U.S. state that could sneak into Canada without anyone noticing, it would be Montana. With its rugged mountains, endless pine forests, and folks who measure snow in feet, not inches, Montana looks like Canada, feels like Canada, and in many ways thinks like Canada. It shares over $700 million in exports with its northern neighbor, and has deep cultural and familial ties that run right across the border. In fact, many Montanans have cousins in Alberta or Saskatchewan, and they cross back and forth like it's just the other side of town. The lifestyle is rural, tough, and fiercely independent, values that resonate deeply with Western Canadians. If you've ever been to a bar in Montana during hockey season, you might just forget which country you're in. And yes, they love maple syrup too, but don't tell them it's Canadian. But beyond the moose sightings and cowboy hats lies something more serious, a growing sentiment of anti-federalism. Many Montanans feel that Washington, D.C. is too far removed from their way of life, and they share a philosophical kinship with Canada's more decentralized governance. Some political thinkers have even floated the idea of forming a regional alliance with Alberta. Two oil-rich, rugged provinces doing things their way. Is it far-fetched? Maybe. But in a world where geopolitical borders are shifting faster than glaciers used to melt, who knows? Could Montana one day decide it fits better with the North than the South? Well, the moose already seem to think so. Number 4. Washington. If there's one U.S. state that's practically already part of Canada without anyone signing the paperwork, it's Washington. With over $20 billion in trade flowing across the border, Washington and British Columbia operate more like neighboring provinces than international territories. From clean energy swaps through a shared power grid to environmental policies that often align better with Ottawa than with D.C., Washington's relationship with Canada is deep, strategic, and, let's be honest, kinda cozy. And let's not forget Seattle and Vancouver. These two cities are like twin siblings who went to different colleges but still hang out every weekend. A proposed high-speed rail between them is just one more sign that maybe, just maybe, we're watching a cross-border bromance in full bloom. But it's not just trade and tech. Washingtonians share Canada's progressive leanings on healthcare, climate action, and yes, even their love of flannel. While the rest of the U.S. might debate electric cars and universal health coverage, Washington's already halfway down the trail with a reusable coffee mug in hand. So here's the real question. If Vancouver and Seattle start sharing sushi bars and voting patterns, how long before someone quietly changes the border signs? Could Washington someday make the polite leap northward for good? Stay tuned. This story is anything but fiction. And if it ever happens, just imagine the headlines. Starbucks now accepts Canadian dollars. Number 3. Oregon. Oregon might be part of the Pacific Northwest, but its gaze has been steadily drifting north. With over $4 billion in annual trade with Canada, the economic bond is undeniable. But it's not just about dollars, it's about values. Western Oregon, in particular, has far more in common with progressive British Columbia than with its more conservative neighbors down south. From environmental activism and climate policy to inclusive social frameworks, many Oregonians are finding themselves nodding along with Canadian ideals. It's like they looked across the border and said, "Maple syrup, free healthcare, and no gun debates? Sign us up." And then there's the Greater Idaho movement, where conservative Eastern Oregonians are pushing to join Idaho, leaving the liberal West behind. That internal divide only deepens the West Side's cultural connection to Canada. So here's a wild thought. What if Oregon did split, and the western half decided to flirt with joining the North instead? Imagine sipping your fair trade coffee in Portland while proudly flashing your new Canadian passport. Too crazy to happen? Maybe. But if the political tension rises and the border gets blurrier, Oregon might just stop saying "eh," ironically. Stay with us. This ride is only getting more surprising. Number 2. Alaska. Alaska, often dubbed the last frontier, might also be the first in line to jump ship if the U.S. ever hit rocky waters. Geographically detached from the rest of the mainland and snuggled up right against Canada, Alaska feels more like a North American third wheel. For starters, to even drive to Alaska from the rest of the U.S., you have to go through Canada. Imagine needing a passport just to visit your own state. Its economy? Deeply intertwined with Canada's, especially in energy and fishing. Canadian companies have long had stakes in Alaska's natural resources. And let's be honest, when half your gas and salmon come from a neighbor, it's more than just a friendship. It's a functional partnership. What makes things even more interesting is Alaska's military alliance through NORAD, where Canadian and American forces jointly guard North American airspace. In terms of sovereignty, Alaska acts semi-autonomously, like that one sibling who lives in the basement but insists they're independent. And let's not forget, it wasn't even originally American. It was part of Russia until 1867. Given its isolated geography, economic reliance on Canada, and history of being handed around like a hot potato, Alaska's bond with the U.S. may not be as firm as we think. If push comes to shove, could the outsider become the first defector? Stay tuned, because the most shocking state is yet to come. Number 1, Michigan. Michigan might just be the U.S. state that accidentally wandered into Canada and never found its way back. With an eye-popping $80 billion trade corridor linking it to our northern neighbor, Michigan's economic bloodstream is deeply intertwined with Canada's. The Detroit-Windsor corridor isn't just a crossing, it's a full-on industrial powerhouse where cars, steel, and parts flow freely across the border, like it's one big assembly line with a maple leaf stamped on it. From the Ambassador Bridge to the new Gordie Howe International Bridge under construction, this state is already sharing key infrastructure like bridges, energy, and supply chains with Canada. If someone told you Detroit was just an extension of Ontario, they wouldn't be too far off, minus the Tim Hortons on every corner, of course. But it's not just modern industry pulling Michigan north. History has a sneaky twist, too. Back in the 1800s, some serious discussions floated around about parts of Michigan potentially aligning with British Canada during times of political tension. Even today, cultural and familial ties across the border remain strong, especially in the border towns. So here's the million-dollar question. If Canada offered free healthcare and permanent hockey tickets, would Michiganders even hesitate? And if the U.S. ever hits a major political breaking point, could Michigan be the first domino to fall northward? Don't go anywhere. The final twist might just leave you questioning where the border really ends.